Hi, I'm Paige Roberts. I'm the maritime analyst for Skylight, and I'm here today to discuss the threat of IUU fishing in the Caribbean. I am a marine scientist. My background is in fisheries science, and I've done quite a bit of work on IUU fishing around the world. So I'm happy to be here today to discuss this with you. Just a brief overview. We'll go through the state of global and Caribbean fisheries, including some fisheries management, common forms of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing, the threat posed by IUU fishing, and some tools to combat IUU fishing. So, just in general, the state of global and Caribbean fisheries. This is a report that's published every 2 years by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So, this is showing the catch from 1950 through 2022. And I think there's a couple of interesting things here to note. One is that the light blue is capture fisheries in marine systems, so that will be the most important to the Caribbean region. And you can see that it increases from 1950 until about 1990s, and then it kind of levels off. So that's sort of an indication that we're fishing around our maximum capacity right now. Otherwise, it would continue to increase because our fishing effort has increased, but the amount of catch has not. There's also been a large increase in aquaculture. That's not the focus of this talk, but it is worth mentioning because it can serve as a good offset to fishing issues and as a sort of supplement to the fishing economy. So, aquaculture has increased significantly over the last 30 or so years, and it's continuing to increase. Fisheries are incredibly important for the global economy. Um, Exports in US dollars is 192.2 billion. So it's a huge global industry. And that's also evidenced by how many people it employs. So in fisheries alone, there's 33.6 million people that are employed in fisheries. So it's a really important part of our global economy. But it is under threat. Sustainability of global fisheries is decreasing. So, when we're talking about sustainability, essentially there's a threshold in the number of individuals of any fish species where there's enough fish of breeding age to replenish the population and maintain it at a level that will continue into the future. So that's the sustainable level. Fishing sustainably means that you are only removing individuals that are outside of that threshold. So you're sort of taking the extra fish. But if you start cutting into the number of fish that are in the breeding population and that number gets small enough, the population will not be able to sustain itself. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying sustainable fisheries. It's a population that can sustain itself with fishing pressure added to it. So about 30% of fisheries in the world are overfished. So that means that they have passed that threshold. The population of those fish is declining, and they may not be able to come back to historical levels because they're being overfished. Um, and this graph, it looks generally pretty good, 30%, maybe that's not so bad, but about 50% is maximally sustainably fished. And that means that we're fishing it right at the threshold of sustainability. So a little bit more fishing effort on these species might mean they move into that orange overfish category, and we have some problems with those fisheries. And I think when we also think about just unsustainable fishing, what people tend to picture are like the really big industrial fishing vessels that are catching entire schools of fish all at once. And those are definitely a part of the picture. But I have this statistic over here that 40% of global catch is by small scale fisheries. So it, when you're picturing those big boats, you have to also picture the boats, the smaller boats with just a few people on board catching fish by cast nets or hook and line. It's just as important as those big industrial vessels. And it's important to keep in mind too, because that's a really significant part of the Caribbean fisheries. So, in Latin America and the Caribbean, um, the graph looks a little bit different than the first one that I showed. Uh, so, a big peak in the 60s, kind of a decline, and then a huge ramp up into the 90s. And then it's sort of, it's much more variable than the global fisheries look like. So, it's an indication of kind of a changing system. The light blue is marine capture fisheries. So that's the vast majority of what's happening in the Caribbean and Latin America. There's also so the Caribbean is 5.8% of global catch. And it's interesting to look at the trend over time, the numbers in this table. It's been fairly stable over the last 5 or so years, but kind of on a decrease at the end of this graph. So it could indicate that there's some overfishing happening in certain parts of the system. What are we talking about when we're talking about the fisheries of the Caribbean? So this is from the FAO. They consider all of the Caribbean island nations plus the Gulf of Mexico and Latin America to be part of the Caribbean and Latin American system. And these are really all connected ecosystems, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But the major fisheries include small pelagics, and that means little fish that swim in schools, not near the bottom, so they're out kind of in the open ocean. And I've color coded these by their level of overfishing. So menhaden are actually underfished. Round sardinella are are stable. Medium sized pelagics, so those are the kind of bigger fish that are swimming out in the open ocean. So mackerel, especially in this region, are important. Um, and then also snappers and groupers, and they are the large reef associated species. They're high value fish, but they're also slow growing and reproduce really slowly. So they are on the overfished side, which is unfortunate because they are a pretty big part of the Caribbean fisheries system. Shrimp, spiny lobster, and conch are also really important in the invertebrates. And they are also pretty high value species, but they're very easily overfished because of the way the fisheries work for them. They're easily collected rather than having to be sought after. So 58% of the fish stocks are estimated to be within biologically sustainable levels, which sounds okay, could be better. It's over half, so kind of middling. But that is actually a decrease of 4.2% from just 2 years earlier. So the sustainability of the stocks as a whole is going down. The makeup of the sector is pretty interesting. So like I was mentioning before, a huge part of the Caribbean fisheries are artisanal or small scale fisheries. So small boats using traps, cast nets, hooks, and lines, and selling locally and for like personal consumption. Um, that makes up for almost 42% of the fleet in the Caribbean. About 48% is industrial. So it's those large scale vessels that fish more offshore for tuna and then some of the high value invertebrates as well. Recreational fisheries are pretty big, and also tourism, which I wanted to mention here just because it's a part of the sort of marine economy. And without sustainable fish, there also wouldn't be as much of a pull for tourism. So it's all connected. And then there's also processing and distribution, which is a big employment portion. So there's going to be different national regulations for every um, country in the region. I can't go into all of them here, but I did want to mention a couple of regional mechanisms. As I was saying before, the all the systems are connected here. So the reef systems of one island nation actually will feed the fish and invertebrate populations of the other island nations nearby. So it's really important to think about managing these fisheries as a whole. And the same goes for highly migratory species. So things like tuna and billfish that travel long distances around the ocean, we can't manage them nationally because they cross too many borders. So we have to manage these fisheries regionally. So the Caribbean region has done that with the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, and they developed the Caribbean Community Common Fisheries Policy, which dictates some management measures for those reef associated species and some of the more the Caribbean sort of local species. The Western Central Atlantic Fisheries Commission is part of the FAO, and its goal is to promote the conservation of all living marine resources, but especially those in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. So they're looking more at the fisheries that are outside of countries' EEZs and outside of national waters. And finally, we have the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, or ICAT, which is a regional fisheries management organization. It has a lot of contracting parties. So those are going to be either the countries where the fishing is happening or the countries that are doing the fishing. So places that are not necessarily in the Atlantic can still be a party to ICAT because they're fishing for tuna there. And one thing that's interesting about RFMOs, or regional fisheries management organizations, is that they're voluntary. So they put quotas on how much tuna and billfish and mackerel can be caught, but they don't really have authority to enforce regulations. But they do list vessels on IUU lists and will put out sort of sanctions and on nations that are not following their rules. So, with all of that kind of in mind as the background of what fishing looks like in the Caribbean, what does illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing look like? This is a great little diagram that shows all the ways that IUU fishing can happen. So it can be illegal against existing laws, regulations, and management systems. Unreported, a combination of maybe misreported catch totals or catch that's just not reported to management organizations at all. And that could be either because a there's not a mechanism in place for reporting, or because there's the or because people are purposefully not reporting their catch. There's also unregulated activities. So those are conducted in areas maybe without a management system. In a lot of places, small scale fisheries don't have robust management systems, even though, like I said, they are 40% of global fisheries. Unregulated fishing also covers places where a flag state is not party to an international agreement, or a stateless vessel, one that's not under a flag. And my slide got a little bit messed up there, but all the information is on the right. So, why does IUU fishing exist? There's a lot of reasons that IUU fishing can become attractive or can become the only option in some cases. In because of climate change, environmental degradation degrades the land. It's taking away our fresh water, making places more arid, and that makes them less able to grow food or to ranch for meat. So that can cause a shift to using more seafood as protein sources. It can also force people outside of historic fishing areas. So, as fish might move based on global warming, the fishers must follow the fish, and they may be crossing boundaries, or they may be going into places that are not normal fishing areas. Um, they also may have to use different fishing methods as fish sizes get smaller. That's an indication of an overfished stock, but that might mean that people switch to smaller mesh sizes on nets, for example, to catch more fish. So there's a lot of ways that environmental influences can sort of force IUU fishing. Um, there's also a lot of money invested in fishing industries, and so if they're not able to catch what they need legally, they may do it illegally. There's a huge demand for fish and protein, and it's only growing with growing populations in the world, and shifting food systems, like I mentioned. The It's also highly profitable, unfortunately. So IUU fishing means that you're avoiding license fees and taxes. Um, you may get subsidies from the country that your vessel is flagged to fish long distances. For example, like offsetting the cost of fuel to travel long distances is a common subsidy. And frequently, the penalty for illegal fishing, if you're caught, doesn't outweigh the profits that you're going to make on the illegal fish. So there's really not a lot of incentive to fish legally. Um, and of course, as I'm sure many of you know, policing the ocean is an enormous challenge. It's a huge area and there's a lot to cover. So, and besides it just being an enormous area with lots of challenges, there's a lot of things that go into effective enforcement that might mean IUU fishing doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So sometimes there's not great training for enforcement agents on what the fisheries laws are, what they need to be looking for illegal fishing. Um, there could also be just not enough resources to staff or equip illegal fishing operations. So I took this photo in the Philippines, but that was the only patrol vessel that you can see there in that region, and it was meant to patrol an entire like an entire region of the country. So if this boat is 3 islands away, how is it going to get to where the illegal fishing is happening? Just low capacity for enforcement. Um, and the logistics are difficult for all of this. I mean, and one of the things that I think is really important to think about is the priorities. If you only have so much capacity and so many resources, you may not want to put them towards illegal fishing when other crimes are much more of an issue. Um, but it's all related. So all the other crimes are related to illegal fishing, and illegal fishing and IUU fishing in general. It all kind of comes full circle. So here are the examples of how illegal fishing can happen. And I put this article here about how the Dominican Republic is facing illegal activities from South Korea, Nicaragua, and Honduras. So they're facing problems of people crossing into their EEZ and overfishing. Um, at the same time, some uh, Dominican Republic fishers were caught fishing in the Bahamas. So the Dominican Republic is facing this issue of foreign vessels coming in and fishing their fish, so that there's not enough for the local people, and the local people have to go cross another boundary and conduct illegal fishing in order to make their living. And this is also a case where the fishing was out of season. So they were caught with grouper that was caught during the closed season. Uh, so it's sort of the knock-on effects of like one illegal fishing act can create more illegal fishing. And then in the Bahamas, 5 people were arrested because they were fishing in a marine reserve. And so the Dominican people are coming in to fish, but the Bahamians also don't have enough resources to fish. So they're going into a protected area to find the largest concentration of healthy stocks. And this was conch. So not directly related, but it is all one system. And I think these 3 cases really show that all the fisheries and all the activities are all connected, and especially in a place like the Caribbean where you have a lot of jurisdictions right next to each other. In along the lines of unreported fishing, there's a lot of different ways that this can happen. In this case, I have an example from Costa Rica. So the United States gave Costa Rica a negative certification, which means that they can implement port access restrictions and potentially trade restrictions on fish from Costa Rica because Costa Rica was not reporting appropriately to ICAT, the tuna RFMO. But Costa Rica listened to the negative certification and the recommendations made within it, and they fixed their errors, they began reporting, and got a positive certification, I think about 2 years later. So it's a crime, but it can be turned around. And unregulated fishing is, sometimes the cause of not understanding laws. And I put this example here from the Bahamas because it's actually a really good example of how to make laws accessible to people and understandable. So make them clear and well communicated so that people can follow them. The consequences of IUU fishing can be really far reaching. So the environmental impacts, first, the data that's contributing to management measures will be inaccurate if if there's a lot of unreported fishing happening. And this is really important because that data goes into the management measures that set limits on fisheries. So that level, that threshold of fisheries, of a sustainable fishery, has to be set by science. And if you're not getting appropriate data, then you could set that level too high and inadvertently fish down a stock and cause it to collapse. It can also throw the ecosystem out of balance. So overfishing could mean that certain species are not in the ecosystem anymore at a level that creates balance. So it can cause an increase in invertebrates that harm corals or other kind of cascading effects in the food chain and the ecosystem that can be detrimental to other species as well. It can cause direct damage to habitat. So trawling, for example, dragging a net along the bottom wreaks havoc on the bottom ecosystem and causes there to be less habitat for animals to live in. And there's also pressure on sensitive species, either as target catch, like sharks for fins, or as bycatch. For example, turtles are a frequent bycatch in nets. And all of this is detrimental to the environment. There's also quite a lot of economic and social impacts. So overfishing means less fish to catch, and that can make it unsafe for people because they have to go farther in order to catch fish. They have increasing food and economic security because they can't catch enough to support themselves and their families. It can also go as far as contributing to violence over the resources. So, this is a map of militarized fisheries conflicts. So, this is actually conflicts where the military got involved over fish. So, actual violence ensued because of fisheries. So it's not a small issue. There's also losses to the national economy where catch isn't landed in countries. It's being removed from their waters and taken away by foreign boats. Lack of landing fees and export revenue. All of that is contributing to losses in the national economy or the regional economy in the Caribbean. And then lower revenue for local fishers. IUU fishing will drive the cost down because it artificially floods the market with illegally caught fish. And that means that the prices for fish will go down, and then the locals will get paid less, even for their legally caught fish. Um, it can lower the quality of products as well. And finally, if the situation is dire enough, people can turn to other illicit income streams to make up what they've lost in fishing. So things like smuggling, drugs, uh, arms trading, all kinds of other illicit activities can result from as part of this system of IUU fishing. How do we address these issues? Um, Sustainable fishing practices. So, good catch documentation and traceability. We talk a lot about traceability and how we can follow a catch from when it's taken out of the water to when a person eats it. And there are lots of systems for this. Technology is helping a lot, and it's only getting better and better. Fisheries transparency is really important in general. So, making sure licensed vessels or lists are published and available to the public. Um, and there's a whole host of transparency initiatives that are happening in fisheries to try to make the fish make consumers understand where the fish comes from. Um, we can improve international maritime governance with better fisheries management science, bringing market forces to bear. So perhaps not insuring vessels that are known to be illegally fishing. Also, large companies have made commitments to only buying sustainable products. So those things can really start to shift the attitude about fishing and make legal fishing more profitable than illegal fishing. Um, and persistent and visible enforcement matters. So there's soft enforcement, making sure people understand laws, making sure that catch systems are clear and documentation is clear. And then, of course, hard enforcement. So actually going out there and intercepting illegal fishing, um, and effective monitoring is a big part of that. So, technology has really improved how we can monitor for fishing activity. And there's a lot of tools out there. So, Skylight is, of course, one it's offered at no cost. And there's others out there. So, this is a slide about the Joint Analytical Cell, and we provide a lot of support to countries that need help understanding and collecting data and technology to use as patrols and to monitor their illegal fishing. So this is available to you, and you can contact me. My email address is at the end if you'd like to learn more about it. So thank you so much. I know that was really quick, but I appreciate your attention. And please email me if you have any questions, or I can answer anything about the Joint Analytical Cell or anything else about IUU fishing. Thank you.